Take two. Last time I clicked start recording my phone rang like as soon as it started recording, so I just kind of stared at it for a while. Alright, so I'm going to be doing something different, obviously, if you paid attention to my last video. Um, Hi everybody that's fans of my page on Facebook. Yes, I run a page called Spidey on Facebook, and I told them last night that I was going to start reviewing these, so I plan on posting this there because it's relevant to my page. So, hi, this is what I look like, this is what I sound like, this is my crap. So, like I said a couple days ago, I'm going to start reviewing comic movies and TV shows and everything alongside this whenever I get around to doing that again. And I'm going to start off with the guy that I have the biggest connection to and my favorite comic character ever. So, back in 2002, we really hadn't had many comic movies at the time. We had X1, which is okay. I haven't seen that movie in years, though. I don't remember when X2 came out, and I think that was about it. We had X1. I think X2 was out at the time. The first Hulk movie didn't come out until, like, what, a year later or something, '03? I can't remember when that movie came out, but there really wasn't many hero movies out at the time. So it was kind of a big deal when Spidey's got announced because, Spidey. He's the big, next to Batman and Superman anyway, he's like the big one, the big guy. And I, being a 5th grade kid at the time, was really excited for it. I mean, I even got the book of the movie where it had basically the whole movie in a book form. They don't make those anymore for movies. I don't think they sold very well, but I got it because I was stupidly excited for this movie. So I couldn't sleep that Friday night beforehand because we were going to go see it Saturday as it came out. And we saw it, and I was in love with it, mostly because it was about Spider-Man, and it wasn't until years later where I started to, how to decipher things and go into what makes something good and bad and all that stuff. And I haven't really watched this movie from beginning to end, and shoot, I don't know how long it's been. So last night, I finally decided to sit down and rewatch the original 2002 Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man 1, which I did not watch it this way when I got it. This was probably the last movie I got on VHS. That's how old this movie is. It had a tape release. I didn't get this until years later when we finally got around to getting a DVD player. So let that sink in. It had a cassette tape release. Not a cassette tape, but a VHS tape release. That movie is old. Oh boy. Just let that sink in for a little bit. We still had tapes back in 2002. So the movie starts off with a spider web with Peters talking about, just having a nice little intro speech and everything. And then he says something along the lines of, this story is about a girl. And in that one sentence, he just sums up the entire movie trilogy. I'm just going to say that right now. He sums up the entire trilogy there. Don't know what I mean by that? Stick around until when I get to the end of my Spider-Man 3 review. God, that movie. I forgot I have to watch that movie again. What have I gotten myself into? Alright. So the movie starts off with his origin story. And I don't really think I need to explain his origin story because if you've read this, then you practically know what it is. And that's the one thing. This is the essential, in case you're curious as to what it is. Um, they basically took the story from this issue, Amazing Fantasy 15, which was Spidey's first appearance for those like 3 of you that don't know anything about anything. They took that story almost panel for panel right out of this and put it under the movie. That is one of the few things I will give the Raimi movies. Yes, I'm not particularly a fan of these movies per se. I really never was, but I'll save that for Spider-Man 3 video. So I did enjoy that. I do enjoy watching moments from the comics come to life in cartoons or comics. So legitimately, I actually enjoyed that part. There were a few little changes here and there, like, well, Goblin Norman Osborn was given his powers kind of during the origin story, per se. But that's one of the few changes, and he didn't, the crook that he let get away wasn't stealing the wrestler money in the comics. He was stealing from one of kind of like, he was a stuntman after a while. In Amazing Fantasy 15, he fought the wrestler, got his money, and then made his suit and became like a stuntman. And then I think his boss got robbed. So they kind of cut out a part of his origin story. But for the most part, it's almost exactly the same as Amazing Fantasy 15. So I did like that. But let me go into a little bit more detail. They see him on the bus, getting kind of bullied like Peter usually gets bullied. And they go to a scientific facility where they take a field trip. We get introduced to the Osborns here. Norman being all, Harry, you got a cool friend here and everything. So while he's taking pics of MJ, he gets bit by the spider. And he goes home and falls asleep. And when he wakes up, he's more muscular and his eyesight has been fixed up. While this is happening, we learn that Osborn is trying to make like a glider tech suit for the military, along with a serum to like enhance super strength, kind of like a super soldier serum type thing. It's not going very well, and they decide to say it's either going to be you or this other company that we're going to buy their product from. He decides to test the serum on himself, and it does exactly what his scientist said. It increases your strength, speed, agility, but it drives you insane, and he ends up killing his scientist. But he doesn't know he killed a scientist because the thing kind of created like a separate personality, which is the Goblin. So Peter has a talk with MJ, and she sees him going off with, sees him, yeah. Kristen Dunst's so bad that she's a he now. But she goes off with Flash, and she sees Flash's, I'm getting genders confused right now. Peter sees Flash's new car, and he was thinking, so he looks in the newspaper and sees a car dealer, like cars and everything, and then he sees, get 3,000 for staying in the ring for 3 minutes with this guy. He puts on the suit, goes and beats him in about like 2 minutes or something, and he only gets $100 for it, and feels like he got ripped off. He gets mugged. Peter lets the guy go. And then on his way home, he sees that his uncle was shot. Uncle Ben was shot. We all know this is part of the story. He goes after the guy, finds him in a warehouse, sees that it's the guy that he let go. He falls out of a window and supposedly dies. Peter then remembers that Uncle Ben told him with great power comes great responsibility. And we all know that part of the story too. We cut to them graduating from high school with MJ breaking up with Flash. Thank goodness, Flash is a douchebag anyway. He always has been. And we see Peter starts to make a suit for himself, and he starts taking down thugs. I like this cool little montage with him taking criminals down and Jameson being all mad and everything. Now, I'm just going to say right now, J.K. Simmons is outstanding in his role. I'm talking about in all three movies. He's outstanding in his role as Jameson in these movies. He gets the anger down. I mean, he even looks just like Jameson. And I love it. And a good thing is, though, they're trying to get him to come back to do Jameson in Amazing 3, which would be amazing. Pun intended, actually. I hope they do it though, because seeing him interact with Garfield's Peter would be pretty sweet. But he sees the gig in the paper and decides to start taking pictures of himself to sell the Bugle, and it works. Supposedly. So now we cut back to Osborne, and he's saying that we got that other company's prototype got blown up because Osborne took the Goblin suit and blew up their prototype and killed all the people in the military from that company, basically wiping their projects off the map. And he's saying it was helping Oscorp's business, but the board of directors was like, no, that other company bought us out and you can't come with us, so you have to resign by the next month. So Osborne kind of like twitches a little bit, and then we go to this festival thing that Oscorp is running with Peter taking pictures, and he sees that MJ and Harry are together. And then the Goblin comes in and kills the board of directors of Oscorp, and Spidey goes after him, fighting him, breaks his glider. Goblin flies away, screaming, "We will meet again, Spider-Man!" and saves MJ for the first time. And I say first time meaning that there will be more times at which she will be saved. And it becomes a recurring theme. Ugh, I don't like her. So there's some more stuff, and we get to a part where no, I skipped a part. Okay. So the Goblin goes after Jameson and asks him, "Where's the guy that takes the pictures of Spidey?" Spidey shows up, and Goblin puts him to sleep with some gas and takes him to a rooftop and kind of talks to him about, "We have the power to rule everything. You should join me." A little while later, Spidey goes to try to save people from a burning building, and he runs into Goblin again, and he says, "Have you thought about my offer?" And Spidey's like, "You crazy, Goblin." So they have a cool little fight scene in a burning building, and Spidey gets out while some of Goblin's little blade thing cuts his arm. He heads back to his apartment where him and Harry are living, where they're going to have Thanksgiving dinner with Harry, MJ, Aunt May, and Norman. He shows up, and they go inside his room because they heard something up in Peter's room. He's stuck to the roof, and a little drop of blood lands on the floor, and Osborn turns around and sees it. And then Peter comes into the door with a can of stuff, and then he sees that Spidey's arm is bleeding. Norman puts two and two together and realizes that Spidey and Peter are the same person. Great. Am I right? But while Norman is leaving, he tells Harry that a girl like MJ will just use him for his money and then kick him to the side. Norman and Goblin have this creepy little talk thing in his bed, in his living room, and this is kind of one of the creepier things about this incarnation of the Green Goblin, is that the Green Goblin is normally not a dual personality with Norman Osborn, but more of, when he snaps, he goes Goblin, but he's the same person. It's just that when he starts to get mad or goes a little bit twitchy, he goes Goblin. But here it's like two separate personalities, and it's a bit weird because he ends up talking to the Goblin half of himself, which does make him seem a bit more creepy. I'll give him that, but it's just weird, and it's a bit too creepy for its own good. But he says that the best way to attack someone like him is through his heart. So Goblin kidnaps Aunt May right from her house, and while she's screaming about like his big yellow eyes, Peter realizes that he knows who I am. MJ shows up the next day, and they have a talk about MJ saying that I'm in love with somebody new. She's obviously meaning Spider-Man, because at this point Spidey saved her twice, so the tally's up to 2. I'm gonna keep track of this. The tally is up to 2. And then she was like, "Have you ever talked to Spider-Man? Has he mentioned me?" She's like, "Yeah, he asked me what I thought of you." And then he goes on this really cheesy description of what he thinks of MJ. And I mean, it's really corny, kind of cringeworthy to some extent, but it's. And then MJ says something along the lines of, I can't remember exactly what she said, but it made Peter realize that. No, it was when he was talking to. I'm getting my events confused here. Harry comes in and sees that they're holding hands. He's still dating MJ at this point. And then he goes back to his dad and says, "You were right about her. She's with Peter now." So Goblin goes after Mary Jane, and when Peter was talking to Aunt May, she said something that kind of made him realize that maybe MJ's in trouble. So he calls MJ's apartment, and then the Goblin picks up, telling Peter to go to the bridge where MJ is basically on top of the bridge. Goblin cuts the wire to like a, it's not a trolley car, but it's what do you call those? Tram cars? Something like that? Transverse cars? I don't know what. It's like the one on the wire. I actually don't know the names for those things. Cuts the wire, holds onto it, holds MJ, and be like, "Okay, Spidey, you want to do this? This is what a hero has to sacrifice. Either lose your girl or lose all the kids." So he jumps, grabs MJ, swings under the bridge, grabs the wire, and now he's just hanging there. MJ around his shoulder and the car in his other hand. Goblin starts kind of like screwing with him by punching him and everything while he's trying to have MJ crawl down the wire in a boat, trying to come underneath so we can drop the car onto it. And then a bunch of people on the bridge start throwing crap at the Goblin for attacking Spidey. And it's weird because the first thing that hits Goblin hits him when he's under the bridge. Like, if you go back and watch that scene again, he's under the bridge and then he gets hit by something and then he flies out from under the bridge. That doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Spidey puts the car on the boat, and then his spider sense doesn't go off, and Goblin takes him and flies into this rundown building. There were about 2 or 3 instances in this movie where his spider sense should have gone off but didn't. I mean, it's like sometimes it feels like the writers forgot that he had that ability in the first place. So Spidey gets thrown into this rundown building and gets a pumpkin bomb to the face. Goblin comes in and starts beating him up, saying that you've ticked me off. I'm gonna take MJ and kill her. And as soon as he said this, Spidey goes ape on his face. And when he's about to put like a knockdown blow on the Goblin, he takes off his helmet. It's like, "No, it's me, Norman Osborn." He starts to bargain with him. He said, "I've been like a father to you." And Peter says something along the lines of, "I had a father, and his name was Ben Parker." And Goblin launches the glider at him. He jumps, impales himself, and Norman dies. He brings Norman back to his apartment where Harry sees him placing the dead body on a couch. For some reason, he took the Goblin suit off of him. I don't know why he did that. I would have just taken him back to his apartment and be like, "You figure it out." But this does lead to a plot point with Harry hating Spider-Man, as he says when him and Peter are hugging at the end of the movie. And then they show Peter looking at Uncle Ben's um, tombstone, and MJ comes over and admits that she loves him, but he can't offer anything more than a friendship, which is a lie because he likes her a lot. And this leads to a lot of bullcrap. I mean, a lot of bullcrap, especially in Spider-Man 2. Oh my god. So he walks off with a cool little montage, cool little saying, and we have a final swing with him jumping off the Empire State Building, and that ends the movie's plot. It's really simplistic, nothing too deep. So, how was the first attempt at a live-action Spider-Man movie? Well, it was okay. It's not nearly as good as I remember it being when I was watching it when I was younger. That's for sure, because, well, it has aged in a little ways. Just look at the special effects in this movie. The special effects in this movie really haven't aged well at all. I mean, you can look at some of the newer movies. Now, granted, this is just time affecting special effects because things have gotten a lot better since then. But I think even in the X-Men movie, which came out like, what, 2 years before this, that the special effects for that movie were much better than this, and it's 2 years older. They look fake. They look really rubbery. What I mean by rubbery is when they're moving, their limbs are just flailing everywhere, kind of ragdolly, and it does make things look a bit weird at times. But it's okay. I think maybe in like another 5, 6 years, they will look even worse. But I mean, they're passable by today's standards. But like I said, give about 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road, and they will look just abysmal. So that's gonna hurt the movie in the long run. But they're okay. Um, Peter is he's okay in this movie. Um, for those of you on my Spidey page, you'll know that I'm not necessarily a fan of Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. This mostly has to do with Spider-Man 2, but that's the best Spider-Man movie. Why are you insulting? I'll talk about that tomorrow maybe when I review Spider-Man 2. But in my opinion, this was Tobey's best job as Spider-Man, probably because the writers made him somewhat bearable. He did have some corny lines, like when he was fighting the wrestler, he said, "Nice suit, did your husband give it to you?" And he told Jameson that mom and dad were talking when he was talking to the Green Goblin and stuff. He had his corny Spider-Man-ing lines in this movie from time to time. And his crying in this movie, yes, his crying, because that becomes a staple of this character, was understandable because it had to do with Uncle Ben most of the time. So it's passable. In my opinion, this is the most tolerable he ever was in any of these Spider-Man movies. Um, MJ, aka Kristen Dunst, she was 3 times, had to be saved, because the thing at the bridge was a third time. So we're up to 3 at the end of one movie. 3 times being rescued in one movie. Oh boy, we're going to hit double digits probably by the time this is over with. She was, I'm going to say the same thing I said about Maguire. This was her best or most tolerable uh, version of MJ in these 3 movies. I say that now because I know a lot of people love Spider-Man 2. I get it. But I found Peter and MJ to be kind of hard to watch in that movie. I'll explain it a bit more in my next video when I rewatch Spider-Man 2, probably tonight. I'm not necessarily looking forward to it, but I'm doing it for you guys. The 2 characters themselves really didn't change all that much throughout the movie. Aside from, Peter was trying to convince MJ to like him, and seeing her kind of flash between Harry and Peter and all this stuff, and then admitting to it, and then Peter kind of drops it at the end. It's like, I can't do this. So, I mean, they did establish the relationship pretty well in this movie. It's what happens after this movie is what screws the whole thing up, where it becomes kind of unwatchable at times. Now for William Dafoe's attempt at Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin. Uh, it was corny in some instances. I mean, his original motive was understandable. He got upset at the people. He got upset at the people that were kind of screwing him over, and then he used the goblin persona to take them out. That's an understandable motive. But once he took, I got a hair in my eye. Of course, when I'm reviewing something, this happens. But after he took those people down, then it just became bargaining with the hero, and uh, it kind of made the goblin seem weak because he wasn't trying to be evil, he was trying to be compassionate, and that's not something that the Green Goblin is known for. But the bridge scene at the end where he had the choice thing with MJ and the kids was actually better than I remember it being. But when the Goblin was singing the Itsy Bitsy Spider, eh, I mean, he wasn't bad. It's just I kind of like the Amazing 2 Green Goblin a more. I wouldn't say a bit more because I think it's by a pretty good margin. Only because I kind of the Green Goblin is meant to be a terroristic type villain, not a negotiator. He did show signs of that. I'm assuming if Spider-Man joined him, then he would have become something like that. But I really wasn't. Now you could say this is kind of weird because he has bombs and a glider that can stab you, but I really wasn't intimidated or fearful of him. Like he just seemed way too laid back to be the Green Goblin for me to take him seriously. And I didn't necessarily enjoy it too much. But overall, the entire movie to me wasn't bad. It's just boring. There really wasn't any moments that stood out aside from the bridge scene. The best part of the movie was hands down the origin scene only because it was Amazing Fantasy 15 practically ripped right out of the pages. And I like that about this movie. But after the origin story ended, it was just kind of a slugfest. And I don't mean like a boxing match slugfest. I mean like the animal, a slug. It was just inching its way along, and then it just kind of ended, and it wasn't fun to watch until the bridge scene, which was amusing enough, but I don't know. I'll explain the whole thing about this movie leaving an impact on me when I get done with Amazing Spider-Man, because that's something I use when I try to compare and contrast the two styles of Raimi versus Webb. But I mean, the movie isn't bad. It's held up pretty well for its day and age. And now by that I mean 12 years later. But I always remember this being the best of the Raimi trilogy. I know, hands down, many other people say it's Spider-Man 2. I'm not going to really speak my mind on Spider-Man 2 because, like I said, I haven't watched that movie in its entirety in a couple years either. But I remember not necessarily being a fan of Spider-Man 2 all that much. But it's an average movie. It's okay. The origin story is the best part, but after that, it's kind of dull corniness. Spider-Man isn't entertaining to watch. MJ is painful in her own way, and then the Goblin is. I've already explained that. And then Jameson is probably the best part of this whole movie, and that'll be a recurring theme also, where Jameson will be the best character in the movie. So with that being said, I will tackle everybody's fan favorite Spider-Man 2 in my next video.